Let's get things started. Hey guys, Hattopy here. Capcom has been on quite the tear as of late, publishing great games like Mega Man 11, Resident Evil 2 Remake, and just recently Devil May Cry 5. With all this stuff going on, it's almost like we're entering back into another gaming renaissance for Capcom that we haven't seen in quite a bit. But everything's not quite so perfect just yet. More specifically for Devil May Cry 5, it fell into our laps, garnering universal praise and admiration all across the board. I say it like that though because I almost passed it up. When the game was being marketed after its initial announcement, I was somewhat stunned to find that microtransactions were going to be implemented in the game. I've been a fan from the start, and after witnessing that beautiful announcement trailer, to then being told I might have to pay more money to get the best experience in the game, I was quite disheartened and was reserved to waiting on reviews to see if I was going to get the game. Well, sure enough, all early reviews are giving this game perfect scores, admiration of the highest regard, and the promise that microtransactions were not going to impact the game. So I caved and I decided to go and pick it up. So that's what we're here to do today. So let's get crazy and take a look at Devil May Cry 5. So Devil May Cry 5 starts out with returning Dante and Nero, as well as newcomer V, climbing this large beanstalk in the middle of Redgrave City. V had contacted Dante prior to deal with a powerful demon that resides at the head of it, with Nero climbing it to get revenge on the individual that had earlier ripped off his demonic arm. Reaching the top seems easy enough. However, Urizen, the demon in question, has other plans for our heroes, as Dante and company are put down pretty easy just as Nero shows up, with him not faring much better. Dante attempts a last-ditch devil trigger to hold Urizen off, allowing V and a reluctant Nero to make their escape to grow stronger, as even Dante knows this fight is too much at this point. And that's the gist of the first part of this game's plot. It's all about Nero and V growing stronger as they attempt to do what they can to gain the upper hand against Urizen. Now, Devil May Cry has never really been one to have an overtly difficult plot to follow. Most of the games have been kind of fairly simple, but there has been enough of this property over different forms of media that has now become canon to the overall universe of everything that this game's plot does kind of get tangled in itself sometimes. Not nearly as bad as something like Kingdom Hearts 3, oof, but it is a little bit confusing sometimes. What's nice though is that firstly, by the end of the game, ignoring some odd callbacks every now and again, you can follow the plot of DMC5 from start to finish. Well, start till about 90% of the way. I'll get to that point. Secondly, there's a decent recap of the series that you can watch before starting the game. It's great because why are there subtitles on alongside the big flowing text that tells the exact same thing? Ugh. Anyways, it's great because it talks about the biggest points that you would need to know, including the fact that the anime story is involved a fair bit, DMC2 is hardly involved, poor Lucia, and DMC Devil May Cry is not even going to be touched ever again, most likely. But that's all I'll discuss for now. As for how this game performs, on PS4 at least, this game's graphics are pretty good, if at least a little muddied sometimes. The game runs on the RE engine, so character models and monster designs all look really good, alongside some half-decent facial capture for the humans, though no system seems to be perfect just yet. RE engine's weakness comes when characters need to do something alongside like heavy breathing or like an open mouth phrase or word or whatever. I find that lockjaw tends to set in place for them, but that's neither here nor there. The designs for these characters in the RE engine also look pretty good. Particularly, I really like Lady's design. Her updated look looks really good. Not like her angry schoolgirl outfit from 3 and whatever the hell 4 was all about. I can tell you what it was all about. All about them boobs. But her 5 outfit, it just looks really good. I like the overall style of it, the designs, and it just looks really good. As for Nero and Dante, they both also look pretty good too, except that Dante's coat, I kind of wish it was more red than burgundy. Though I guess if you really think about it, it kind of makes sense since he'd probably be wearing it like almost every day. As for V and Nico, I don't really mind their designs, I suppose. I actually kind of like Nico's little like half crop top thing that kind of doubles as a welder's suit when she slaps the other piece of fabric on. It's kind of funny. But what I don't really like is having tattoos for the sake of having tattoos. Yeah. Okay. I'm not the biggest fan of tattoos, to be honest. I can live without them. But there are definitely some people that can rock tattoos like really well. Or sometimes they can have like a design that actually complements their bodies well. For me though, I just don't like tattoos just for the sake of having it. And in this case, it's just too egregious to me. It doesn't look very nice to me. V's kind of makes sense since it's kind of like a tribal thing going on, but whatever. I'm not the biggest fan of it. As for Trish, she's literally had absolutely no update to her design since DMC 1, unless you count Gloria, and it too kind of looks dumb now. Contradictory to that, the final design worth noting that I really like is actually Virgil's. It actually looks really nice. It doesn't update too much from it, but I've always kind of liked his base design anyways, and the colors on his coat look pretty good. Oh, I'm not spoiling anything by mentioning Virgil anyways, so don't you worry about that. For longtime fans, this scene alone from the announcement trailer was all the confirmation we needed to know who it was. And for those just stepping in, you can probably infer that idea just from the recap alone. So I don't feel bad for bringing this up, though I am going to keep the really big spoilery stuff out of this entire thing, period, or until much later on. So anyways, moving on. So the character models are solid. The actual layout of the levels are a bit less interesting. A few levels take place outside the primary hell-like location of the Qliphoth tree, and these ones feel like there's more variety and color to these locales. Meanwhile, in the tree, there's a lot of like deep navy blues and some reds. One smaller portion appears like an icy location, but other than that, I feel like the locations you fight in are very samey for the most part. As for the music, DMC has always had some pretty good music, though usually I was always more focused on just trying to be as stylish as possible with the gameplay, and that like heavy metal music wasn't my absolute favorite, so I paid it no mind, really. But that all changed when we finally got Nero's battle theme and arguably the game's main theme, Devil Trigger. But anywho, onto what is probably the most important part of the DMC games, the gameplay. Firstly, just to recap / enlighten for those that are returning to the series or are entering it fresh, you run through a bunch of different levels, running into many hordes of enemies along the way. The goal here is to dispatch them as stylish as possible by mixing in every bit of the character's arsenal that you are playing as into the combat. Each character has long-range attacks as well as close range, linked to two different buttons obviously, as well as a button used as a sort of character-specific action based on which one you are controlling. The game is a lot of fun with its combat when trying to be as cool as possible with it, but it certainly is a difficult game at points, and you need to be able to know when it's the best time to dodge attacks and when it's the best time to go all out or open up opportunities to go all out on your own, even with the rankings slowly going down as time goes on, without doing damage, or even if you just keep repeating the same attacks. It's not as easy as DMC Devil May Cry, but I find the rankings in this game do appear to decrease a lot slower than previous games, though it takes a huge hit when you take damage, so you always need to watch out. You can dodge by locking onto enemies, then hitting the jump button while holding the stick to the side. But I found myself not dodging in a way that I wanted to. I kind of wish there was like a specific dodging button and you could just dodge no matter where you were looking. But anyways, I found it more reliable to purchase everyone's double jump as early as possible and just use that to get out of everyone's harm's way. The more stylish you are alongside with spots that you can pick up around the levels, you can collect red orbs that are used to purchase items and new attacks from the shops. As well, you can collect white orbs that refill your devil trigger gauge for specific characters, turquoise orbs that refill your health, gold orbs that act as continues, as well as blue and purple orb fragments that will increase your max health and devil trigger respectively when you collect 4 of each. You can also earn those by completing secret missions strewn about the levels. And what's cool is that those 2 items carry over to the different characters that you play as on your journey, as now, unlike previous games, you play through one campaign and you play as different characters for every level. Though when replaying some of the levels, if their icon is there and it kind of asks you beforehand, you can actually replay it as a different character as you please. And some of these levels do have actual multiplayer elements to it. However, I never had PlayStation Plus, so I end up just getting bots playing through it. And really, they're kind of inconsequential for the most part. I think there was one level that there was another character directly involved with what I was doing. But regardless, it's there and it's fine. Speaking of the characters you play as, let's discuss them. I'll talk about them from my least favorite to my favorite, so here we go. V holds an interesting place in the action beat-em-up brawler type game as being not unlike a summoner from Final Fantasy. His ranged and melee attacks manifest into the demon-like creatures Griffin the Bird and Shadow the Panther, and by attacking, they lunge out and do damage, leaving V in the back to do as he pleases, with my suggestion being holding the right trigger to make V read his book, which replenishes his devil trigger gauge while in combat. When he does use devil trigger, he summons his final summon, Nightmare the Nightmare. When in use, he just kind of meanders around, destroying everything in his path. Griffin and Shadow can take damage and potentially go into a state called stalemate that takes a bunch of time to recover from unless V is close by. However, using Devil Trigger Gauge, they are instantly brought back up and are seemingly invincible. I'll have to recheck my footage, so I don't think they actually take damage while in Devil Trigger. Anyways, with Nightmare out, you can get an upgrade that allows you to hop on his back and control Nightmare. I haven't done that because he already wrecks stuff on his own, and I could just read a book on the backlines, further increasing his time out before depleting my Devil Trigger Gauge. The other reason being V's specific mechanic. V's summons can't outright kill enemies. When their health is depleted, they enter into a dying state, to which V can hold the right bumper and hit his character button to teleport to them, stabbing them with his cane, permanently finishing off the enemies. As a mechanic, it's fine, and I do find V to be incredibly easy to obtain the highest combat rating with, but that comes at the cost of just not being very stimulating or intricate as the others. My biggest problem came with the controls not being very good for him. To perform a lot more of the intricate combos with all 3 characters, you have to hold onto the right bumper, and then pressing the stick in certain directions will perform different actions. Now for V, especially with something like Shadow, it's very difficult with him. I found that the orientation of the stick sometimes was dictated by where Shadow was, and it also sometimes was dictated by where V was. So I wasn't getting the attacks I wanted to do at the times I wanted it to happen, and trying to focus on that alone wasn't getting me very far. However, when I gave that up and just started button mashing, I was finding the most success, and you didn't even need to lock onto enemies, so it gave V a better advantage in being able to run around faster or better dodging abilities. So like I said, Shadow and Griffin can take damage, and that can cause you some problems, though I found that enemies kind of had a hard time to hit them most of the time. Really, the most danger came at higher difficulties when they're pretty much one-shotting them, but you can get upgrades that can toughen up Griffin and Shadow, so it kind of didn't matter. And even then, if you wanted to get them out of trouble if they were going to get hit by a really powerful attack, all it took was for you to double jump to get Griffin back or to sidestep to get Shadow back. It was very simple. And outside of that, I just found myself mashing Shadow's button to make him just do a whole bunch of attacks, and holding down Griffin's button because he can charge up this electric wall blast that shoots forward. And all the while I was in the back reading books, summoning Nightmare whenever I had the chance, and I was racking up triple S ranks like it was nothing. I had no problems with V, even on the higher difficulties. Bonus fact: summon Nightmare as often as possible in any new fight location. Secret pathways only appear when you summon Nightmare, who comes barging through said path, usually hiding one of the game's secret items or missions. Next up, we have Dante. Dante's gameplay has been heavily streamlined for this game, and it does get pretty fun to do. Sometimes it's even a little overwhelming. Dante's combat consists of a variety of guns and melee weapons that are influenced by 4 different stances that he can be in. Trickster allows for Dante to be more maneuverable. Gunslinger and Swordmaster enhances the abilities and damage of guns and melee weapons respectively. And finally, Royal Guard allows you to spend Devil Trigger points to block enemy attacks. I hardly ever used Royal Guard since I find that using Devil Trigger was a bit more important. And with enough meters saved up, that's exactly what you can do. Dante can use Devil Trigger, further enhancing the style that he is in, as well as healing him throughout its duration. But new to DMC5, Dante can now perform a new form of Devil Trigger called Sin Devil Trigger. By sacrificing regular Devil Trigger points, you can fill the Sin gauge, and when it's full, you can hold the Devil Trigger button to enter into this form. Sin Devil Trigger gives Dante overwhelmingly powerful standard combos, as well as a variety of new attacks exclusive to this form, whilst also seemingly taking no hit stun or anything like that. The only drawback is that Dante doesn't recover health while in Sin Devil Trigger, but just look at that damage. Ugh, yummy. As for the weapons, sword-wise, Dante has his standard sword. I'm not going to get into specifics since the type actually changes, but the final sword you get allows for Dante to do some easy combos, as well as summon ephemeral swords to attack. He also starts out with Balrog, which throws out fire punches and kicks, allowing you to charge up his moves with repeated jabs. Later on, he gets Cavalier, these dual chainsaw swords that morph into a motorbike. Good timing with these attacks revs the blades, doing lots of persistent damage over a wide arc. Finally, there's the King Cerberus Nunchucks, a cool weapon that provides a series of quick attacks and defensive capabilities. I used all but Balrog. I found the lack of range and the overall commitment to Dante's capoeira moves a little annoying. But contradictory to that, Cavalier was super fun to use. Its wide attacks that also rev up made dealing with large packs of enemies really easy, and was the sole reason I was actually able to finish this secret mission. As for guns, Dante starts out with Ebony and Ivory, as usual, weak firing pistols that are good for maintaining combos and juggling, though I find not as good as previous games. He also has the Coyote E shotgun, a slow firing shotgun that does mild damage and a lot of knockback. Found literally in just a random corner that I almost missed out on, Dante can find Lady's rocket launcher Catalina N, a powerful launcher that can also fire burst-seeking missiles for long-range damage. Nico gives Dante Dr. Faust, a hat and scarf that manifests your collection of red orbs into a variety of long-range attacks. Finally, Nico gives Dante an approved model of Catalina Ann, meaning if you found the original, you can now dual-wield rocket launchers, which Dante can combine together to shoot a big laser beam that's great for piercing through enemies that block, a lot like the Angelos. I really only stuck with Ebony and Ivory as well as the dual rocket launchers. Coyote's knockback forces me to try and reclose the gap, usually with me using Stinger, which also knocks back, so I found myself doing like repeated knockbacks without a proper way of having like a good flowing combat at play. I also benched Dr. Faust pretty much immediately because the risk of using up my red orbs was not tantalizing at all, and the short time that I did use it, the amount of orbs used versus the amount gained from killing 3 very basic enemies was not beneficial at all. And that's all to Dante's weapons, and of course all of them changing properties depending on which style that you're in. That's a lot to his combat, almost too much. It feels like recently that a lot of developers feel like that you need to use like every single button on this just as much as the other ones, and it's causing me issues, man. And I know this is more of a purely subjective thing going on for more than just this game specifically, but for this one specifically, Dante really kind of suffers for me in the long run. I'm kind of bad with Nero as well, but that's more for just being forgetful for some of his stuff. But like there's just so much busy work that goes into this controller, between having to like the swap styles, between having to charge up weapons, between having to switch weapons, between having to target on the enemies, trying to attack, trying to move, trying to charge the devil trigger and then trying to use it, and there's so much busy work that goes into this controller, and it was causing me issues, and I know I just have a way that I like to hold this controller, and it's not to this game's advantage, kind of. I don't know. I'm not trying to knock it so much because it's more of a me thing. But anyways, I end up ditching weapons like I mentioned previously because it allowed for me to be able to swap to the different weapons I wanted to use faster, kind of streamlining all of this to make it a little bit easier. But it wasn't the best thing, I guess. I mean, Dante's combat is fun. It's flashy and it's fun. It's just a little overwhelming for me at least. But if you like it, that's great. Finally, we have Nero. Since his Devilbringer arm was ripped off at the start of this game's events, it was since replaced with Nico's Devil Breakers, a variety of special prosthetics that can perform a multitude of actions. I'm not going to name them all, but I'll just say that my favorite was Punchline, since its basic skill locks onto enemies and starts rocket punching them, doing repeated damage, allowing you to either follow up, charge your weapons, or focus on a different enemy. Also, because it was one of the few that looked the least stupid. Most of the arms kind of look pretty dumb to me. To mimic the original property of the Devilbringer arm, Nero can also use a wire to snatch up smaller enemies or pull Nero to larger ones. You can also detonate the arm for high point blank damage or overcharge it to do an arm specific attack, both actions leading to destroying the arm, forcing Nero to use the next in line. The arm can also detonate though if Nero takes any damage while the arm is in use at any point. That aside, Nero has his Blue Rose gun and Red Queen sword, both of which Nero can charge to augment the way he does damage and also their speed. Amidst all that though, you might be thinking to yourself, like, that doesn't really sound like a whole lot. It sounds pretty basic. What are you talking about? And, well, here's where the big spoilers come into play. So if you really don't want to hear what I'm about to talk about, then go to this point right here. I don't know if I can click here, maybe. Go to this spot if I don't have a thing to click on here. I'm not the best yet. Right at the tail end of the game, when Dante is having his fight with Virgil, Nero runs back to try and stop the two from killing each other. And through his resolve, Nero's demonic bloodline awakens within, regrowing his regular arm back, as well as giving him his spectral wings, allowing him not only the basic skills of the Devil Bringer from DMC4, but also allowing Nero to perform Devil Trigger as well. It isn't much either, mind you, but it is so awesome to snag up smaller enemies and perform fancy wrestling moves and other crazy stuff on them on the fly. Sure, there is a Devil Breaker arm that can let you do that, but now you can mix the two together and it's pretty sweet. And Nero's Devil Trigger seems like the perfect mix of Dante's and V, allowing Nero to regenerate Devil Trigger automatically, but basically having Dante's version of it when active, which is awesome. And sure, it blows that you get it in literally the last mission of the campaign, but Devil May Cry has always had harder difficulties to try out with Nero's new abilities, almost making him a brand new character, which is fantastic. So it gives me even more reason to jump back into the game and play it all over again, more than any other game, really. Granted, I'll probably only get myself to Heaven and Hell mode, since it's super fun to do and it's super derpy, but Hell and Hell just makes me want to pull my hair out. But I guess really, for the most part, that is why I like playing Nero the most. He's a lot like Dante, but with much less busy work in order to do cool stuff. The final big thing to note are the boss fights. There are a lot, almost one for every level, and they range from mostly all awesome to a small handful of, why is this crazy, creepy chicken thing kicking my butt? Jesus. That aside, they've always been a staple of the series, and they certainly feel right at home here. With that said, the final fight with Urizen was so cool. The field you fight in was awesome, and he wasn't an overtly hard fight, but hard enough that I had to learn patterns in the sort. And then, surprise, not surprise, Virgil appears, and while I won't be upset with more game after this, let's just say that the overall conflict of DMC5 died with Urizen, and the rest of the plot kinda doesn't make sense. I won't get too specific, but anywho. So ignoring the final chunk of the game, Devil May Cry 5 is just a really rewarding game. When you play it really well, you just feel so damn good about yourself, and just seeing all the pretty colors and all the sparkly effects, it's just it's so satisfying. And sure, the story right at the tail end doesn't make the most sense, but it does bring the overall lore of the world back together again, which is always nice. Now, before I sign off, there's just one big elephant in the room that I do want to address: microtransactions. Oh, Capcom, how you've blundered in the past. And, well, it's not so bad here. I mean, sure, they have it and it's kind of dumb, but the game isn't hampered by that fact. You can still play through the game. You still collect a bunch of orbs all throughout. I never felt like I was held back throughout it all. And sure, EX provocation is super damn expensive, but if you really want it, then I'm sure you can get it at some point in time. Devil May Cry has always been about just replaying levels to hone your skills, to improve on the scores that you got throughout the levels, try things on harder difficulties, find all those secret paths. There, you will find a way to get the red orbs that you need. There is no reason for you to be touching the microtransactions, okay? If you want to spend your money, spend it on better things than this. That's all I gotta say on that. I say for you to spend it on better things. But anywho, thank you all so much for watching. If you like what you saw, you can click right up here to check out some of my other videos that I've done. Or if you really feel like it, you can click right up here to subscribe. And until next time, guys, I will see you all later.